Thanks. Awesome. I'm just going to take this off. Maybe. Well, thank you so much for having me. I don't think I've ever spoken in Summit before. And as she mentioned, I was in the hospital with pneumonia 10 days ago. So I'm operating at like 50% capacity right now. So bear with me. But as she said, this is a nonpartisan event. I'm actually, until 5 years ago, I was a left-leaning voter. I was your typical millennial, virtue signaling, overly trusting of the public schools parent. And my awakening started in May of 2021. I sent my daughter off to middle school. She had just turned 12. We had just moved here from Florida to Fort Collins area and then again to a new community. It was the height of COVID. We had draconian lockdowns in Fort Collins, which I assume you experienced here in Summit County as well, where the kids were distanced and masked and remote learning. And my daughter was just so isolated. She's a shy, quirky, introverted kid, which we love about her. We always embrace that she didn't quite fit in with the other kids. I used to call her uniquely cool. And one day she was approached by her art teacher, her favorite subject, to stay after school for an art club. Has anyone seen the movie Art Club before I even? Oh, awesome. Okay, well, we'll get into the story then. I'm glad a lot of people haven't heard it. So her teacher approached her, asked her to stay after school for an art club. When she got there, it was actually GSA, or Gender and Sexuality Awareness Club. And the teacher had invited an outside presenter, a woman who runs an organization called Skittles for kids 2 to 11 and Splash for kids 12 and up to talk about gender and sex. She has kids, 12 to 32 was her typical age range for the Splash organization. And she told the kids, first of all, the rule of Art Club was what you hear in here, keep in here. She told the kids if you're not completely comfortable in your biological sex and your body, that means you're transgender. And what 12-year-old girl is comfortable in her body? What 40-year-old woman is fully comfortable in her body all the time? So of course she adopted that label, especially because she was so isolated. And they did what I call glitter bombing. They celebrated her for that proclaiming trans identity. Well, we're your family now. We're your community. We're all part of the LGBTQ umbrella. They asked who she was sexually attracted to. And when she didn't know, because she was barely 12, a very innocent 12, they said, that means you're queer. And she got more stickers and flags and bracelets and celebration for her new label. They talked about things like polyamory, which I had to Google. It's multiple sexual partners at once. They talked about puberty blockers and how to access them in the school without parent knowledge or consent. Well, if you're not comfortable in your body, you can just take these drugs. They're magical. They'll put a pause button and you don't have to feel that discomfort anymore. They talked about how to see a gender-affirming therapist without my knowledge or consent, again, in the school. And they connected my daughter online to these predators, to Skittles and Splash on Discord and WhatsApp and other teen chat platforms where I didn't even know they existed. So I had no idea my daughter was communicating with these predators online. And as my daughter left the room that day, her art teacher even pulled her aside and said, remember, you don't have to tell your parents. Thank God, my daughter came home and told me. Now, it was not, oh, Mom, this horrible thing happened to me today. It was, I understand why I'm uncomfortable in my body. It's because I'm transgender. And I'm going to go by Toby now. I go by Toby at school and I want to cut my hair. And she was fully bought in to this idea that she was actually a boy who'd been born in the wrong body. And she expected me to celebrate her, to glitter bomb her the way that these predators had. And so she was caught off guard when that was not our initial reaction. But that one 90-minute meeting, which I now understand was preceded by years of subtle indoctrination, led to almost a year of the darkest time our family has ever been through. We didn't know how to talk about it. We didn't want to make it worse. We took her to a therapist thinking, I don't know what to say, but the professionals will. And we found out the hard way that in Colorado, licensed therapists are legally obligated to only affirm gender confused kids. And so the first therapist was, quote, queer and trans affirming, pushed her further into that identity. The second therapist, Christian therapist, was so afraid of this subject that she didn't talk about it. And so my daughter continued to get worse and worse and worse, more depressed, more withdrawn, more confused. And by December of 2021, about 6 months after the incident, she left us a suicide note. because she didn't know how to live in the body that God gave her. And so we took her to her pediatrician, scared to death. I can't trust the therapist. She's going to die if I don't help her. And the therapist had me leave the room for the mental health assessment. That's where I learned 12-year-olds are the steward of their own health care in Colorado. And when I came back into the room, she had been prescribed Zoloft, a psychotropic drug, which I now understand is the equivalent of a 30-minute walk. So fast forward to today. It took about a year to get my daughter out of this. It was truly my husband. We were a team effort, but it was my husband who finally sat her down at the kitchen table when he found those Discord messages and said, "Do you really think we don't love you? Do you really think we don't support you?" And she said, "I don't want to do this anymore." That was the moment where we finally gave her an off-ramp to stop the trans identity. We had been avoiding it. She had been getting worse. These people had been feeding lies into her life. And that was the turning point for us. And so a few weeks after she started to get better, we watched the What is a Woman film by Matt Walsh on Daily Wire. Has anyone seen that film? Watch it if you have. It's hilarious. It's just true. We just ask true questions. But while we're watching it, she goes, "Mom, why didn't I understand this was happening to me while it was happening?" I said, "Well, that's by design. You were taken advantage of." And she said, "How do I make sure this doesn't happen to other little girls?" And I said, "You have to let me tell your story. I think we have to go public." And so I contacted a friend who contacted a journalist. And by the next week, I was on Tucker Carlson and Glenn Beck and the Daily Wire. And I didn't even know who Tucker Carlson was. I was a Democrat. And what I found was so many families coming forward. So 4 other families just in that art club alone who had no idea. Their daughters followed the rule that what you hear in here, keep in here. One of those little girls who was on our federal lawsuit that we filed against the district in December of 2021, the same 2-week period that my daughter was suicidal, that little girl drank bleach and almost died. And her parents didn't know. They didn't know she was attending this club, and they were blaming themselves. Where did this come from? Why is she was all the identities. She was queer, bisexual, trans, asexual. And they're like, where does this come from? And it wasn't until we went public and they saw me on the news that they went, "Were you in that club?" And she went, "Yeah, Dad, we weren't supposed to tell you." And so many families since then. I've now been public. This was April of 2022 that I went public. I've now heard from thousands of families across the country who have almost identical stories. Our stories are always the same. It's the quirky kid, the artsy kid, the autistic kid, the girl who's ashamed of her body because she's been sexually abused. And when an adult plants this idea that you can disassociate from your body, you can just accept this trans identity and all your problems will go away, it's so appealing for these kids. And 9 times out of 10, the parents are left in the dark, the same way that I was. Don't tell your parents. This is our secret. We're your family now. So I want to share some things with you. I love to use a PowerPoint because some of the things I'm going to share are so shocking. It's almost hard to believe them. But while we were fighting for our daughter's life at home, and like I can't stress that enough, even now she's 16 and a half, but there's not a day that I don't wake up and go to her room and wonder if she's still breathing, because once your child has been suicidal, that fear doesn't go away. But while we're fighting for her life, I was also fighting back against the district. The next week, my husband, the next day, we pulled her out of school. And in doing that, they sent Child Protective Services to our home 3 days after the art club. My husband called the principal. I stood before the school board pleading, crying, "Please give me answers. Why did this happen? Where is this coming from? Why did you lie to me?" And it took me 3 months to get a sit down with a member of my school board, 7 members. When I finally got a sit down with the school board president, her name's Kristen Draper. It turns out she's got a trans-identified child. She was proud of what had happened. They confirmed that these are confidential clubs because as a school, they're obligated to provide a safe space for children. So a safe space from their parents. And it became clear to me in that moment that no one was on my side. I was so naive and foolish to think someone's going to think this was wrong. Like, this was sexual abuse of a child. Surely someone's going to think this was wrong. Nobody. Not the principal, not the superintendent, not a single board member, not the other parents in my community. I've been called worse names than I can even repeat for my decision to step forward. But I did, when I went to that school board meeting the next week, I met a parent. She said, "Erin, do you know about Cora?" And I was like, "No, who's Cora?" She goes, "No, Colorado Open Record Act. You have a right to see what your school district is doing. How many people here know about Cora?" So great. That's more than most audiences I talk to. So it's the reciprocal of FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. Every state has a reciprocal. Ours is CORA. Our government is beholden to us. Their finances, their calendars, the curriculum, their communications. We have a right to see that, even if you don't have kids in the district, because our tax dollars pay for that school district. And so I started to exercise my right to CORA. Actually, first, I forgot I have this. This is the first time I've ever shared this. Before I move on to what I found, I want to share this video of my daughter, just to show you. The first question I always get asked is, how is your daughter now? And in April, she did her probably one and only, oh, I'm wearing the same suit. Whoops. She did her probably only public speech. It was very emotionally taxing. She's glad she did it. I said, will you ever do it again? She said, probably not anytime soon. But I want you to hear in her own words what she went through and how she overcame.